The canned air still clung to my clothes when I stepped into the glass lobby of Aurora Global Media. My suitcase trailed behind me, wheels whispering over marble. I'd been away for 2 weeks, overseeing our coverage of the film festival, a trip that had gone flawlessly. My mind was already ticking through follow-ups, post-production notes, sponsor calls, but the energy in the office felt different, brighter, sharper, almost too loud. Conversations stopped just long enough for glances to pass between desks, a subtle ripple of awareness that I was back. Near the elevator, a new poster caught my eye, Aurora 3.0. The future starts now. The tagline wasn't mine. Upstairs. I didn't even have to ask before Grace from PR leaned toward me and whispered, "You missed quite the announcement." Her smile was polite, but her eyes held something between sympathy and warning. My office door was closed, which was unusual. I opened it to find Selena Vega, our CEO's daughter, standing by my window, surveying the skyline like it belonged to her. She turned, her designer suit immaculate, every detail Instagram ready. "Marina," she said warmly, stepping forward. "Perfect timing. Dad's in Switzerland for the next few months, and he's asked me to step in as interim global creative director." The words hung in the air, heavy but sugar-coated. I'd been the creative lead in all but title for years. Now the title was hers. Before I could respond, Damian Cross appeared in the doorway, his expression smooth and unreadable. "Selena's asked me to assist with launching Aurora 3.0, he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Selena clasped her hands. "We're taking the brand into a bold new era, global live stream events, immersive campaigns, complete reimagining. It's going to be huge." I nodded slowly, choosing each breath before each word. "I'm sure it will be." Grace's voice from outside cut in, announcing the strategy meeting in 10 minutes. Selena swept past me, Damian at her side. I stood in my own office, the skyline beyond unchanged, yet every line of my work here suddenly felt provisional. I picked up my notebook and followed them to the boardroom, ready to see exactly what Aurora 3.0 meant. The boardroom was buzzing before Selena even began. Screens lined the walls, each showing sleek mock-ups of stages bathed in neon light, hashtags flashing across international skylines, and celebrity cameos from every continent. She stood at the head of the table, her voice confident, practiced, every phrase designed to dazzle. Aurora 3.0 will be a series of simultaneous live stream events in 8 major cities, she said, clicking to reveal a world map lit up like a festival. We'll blend music, film, gaming, and interactive audience participation streamed on every platform we control, plus a few new ones. This isn't just a rebrand, it's a global moment. There was a murmur of approval around the table. I kept my hands folded, listening. It was ambitious. It was also perilously expensive. When she paused, I leaned forward. "It's a striking vision." Selena. But a campaign of that scale will triple our production budget for the quarter. More importantly, it risks alienating the traditional audience that built Aurora's reputation. We've spent decades cultivating trust. If we pivot too fast, we could lose it for a heartbeat. The room was still. Selena's smile didn't falter, but I caught the faintest narrowing of her eyes. That was when Damian spoke, his tone smooth but sharp enough to cut. "Maybe," he said casually. "Marina doesn't understand Gen Z anymore. They're not looking for trust. They're looking for excitement." The remark drew a few awkward chuckles. My stomach tightened, but I kept my voice steady. Excitement is meaningless without staying power. We can have both, but we have to pace the change. Selena waved her hand lightly, steering the conversation back to her slides. "We'll adjust for the budget later. Right now, the priority is vision. I want everyone thinking big." By the time the meeting adjourned, Commitments had been made, timelines drafted. My notes were full of red flags, logistical nightmares, potential sponsor pushback, but no one seemed eager to hear them. As we filed out, Damien leaned close enough for only me to hear. "Don't worry," he said with a smirk. "We'll make sure you keep up." I didn't answer. Instead, I walked straight to my office, opened a fresh page in my notebook, and began writing down exactly how this could go wrong. The first signs were subtle an email thread I wasn't copied on, a meeting rescheduled without my knowledge. I brushed them off at first. Campaign launches were chaotic. Wires could get crossed. Then I opened the latest progress report for the executive team. My name appeared twice, each time beside notes claiming I had declined proposed concepts for live stream formats, concepts I'd never even seen. I printed the report and carried it straight to Selena's office. She was on a call, Damien leaning casually against her desk. He looked up, his smile polite but unyielding. "This needs correcting," I said, sliding the pages toward Selena when she hung up. She glanced at them briefly. "I thought you decided those ideas weren't viable. That's what Damien told me. I never saw them." I replied evenly. If I had. My feedback would have been based on facts, not assumptions. Selena's gaze flicked to Damien, but he just shrugged. It must have been a misunderstanding. Things move fast. Fast enough, apparently, to move right past me. Over the next week, brainstorming invites stopped appearing in my calendar. The production team began sending their drafts directly to Damien for approval. When I asked about it, I got vague assurances just streamlining the process. "We'll loop you in later." Meanwhile, the campaign's direction was veering into dangerous territory, costly venue choices in cities with minimal market share, untested tech integrations, and schedules that overlapped with existing programming. I kept my observations to myself for the moment, documenting every detail. One afternoon, I passed the conference room and saw the door closed, blinds drawn. Laughter filtered through Selena, Damien, and the rest of the creative team, sketching out what looked like the final storyboard for the launch event. My absence was no accident. I walked away without knocking. If they wanted me invisible now, I would let them think I was. But invisibility has its uses, especially when you're watching for the first cracks to appear. By the end of the week, I had a private file growing on my desktop screenshots, memos, budget drafts, all the pieces I'd need when those cracks turned into something they couldn't hide. The boardroom was already full when I walked in, a long table gleaming under the cold lights. Selena stood at the head, a digital presentation glowing behind her. The words, Aurora 3.0, progress update in bold. She began with a string of statistics, all framed as wins, projected viewership spikes, social media engagement, influencer partnerships. Then her tone shifted. "However," she said, clicking to a slide marked Internal Challenges. "We've faced resistance to certain innovations, resistance that slows momentum. Some members of the team are reluctant to embrace the necessary risk for growth." Her eyes settled on me, just long enough for everyone to notice. Marina has been hesitant to approve several key creative elements, which has limited our ability to move at the speed we need. I felt every gaze turn my way. My hands stayed folded on the table. I've raised concerns about budget overages and untested technologies, concerns supported by our own analytics. That's not resistance, that's risk management. Before Selena could respond, Damien leaned forward, voice calm, almost helpful. Perhaps the solution is simple. Marina's talents are undeniable, but maybe her expertise is better used on a legacy project. I can take over the production elements for Aurora 3.0 so she can focus without distraction. There was a ripple of nods, the kind that signal a decision is already made. Selena smiled faintly. "That's a constructive idea." Marina, we'll have you oversee the Heritage Series revival. It's important work and perfectly suited to your strengths. It was a demotion in all but name. I could have argued. But in that moment, I recognized the trap push back and prove their point, or accept quietly and keep my seat at the table, just not the table they thought I wanted. I nodded once. Understood. The meeting moved on without me. I sat back, taking in their voices as if from a distance, already shifting my mind toward a different kind of strategy. When the session adjourned, I left without a word, heading straight for my office to start outlining the Heritage Series and to keep building the file I'd been assembling in the background. The first week without my oversight felt like watching a slow-motion collapse from behind soundproof glass. Production emails began stacking up in my inbox not because I was looped in, but because panicked junior staff copied me in desperation. Venue confirmations had slipped. Technical rehearsals were double booked in Singapore. A key lighting shipment sat in customs because no one had filed the clearance forms I'd put in place years ago. I forwarded each message to the appropriate team lead, resisting the urge to step in directly. This was their show now. By midweek, the sponsors started calling. Not me, Selena. Grace from PR confided over coffee that 2 major backers were threatening to pull funding unless they got firm delivery dates. Selena had promised them press exclusives and brand placements, but the production timeline was sliding, making those promises fragile. Guest bookings fared no better. The headline act for the Tokyo stream canceled after travel arrangements fell through. In New York, a high-profile director withdrew when the contract revisions Damien approved cut his creative control. I saw Selena pacing in the hallway outside her office one afternoon. Phone pressed to her ear, voice low but tense. Damien emerged minutes later, smoothing his jacket. When I passed them, I caught his words. It's under control. Just trust the process. The thing about chaos is that it compounds. Each missed detail bred 2 more, and the cracks I'd been documenting widened into chasms. From my vantage point on the Heritage Series, I could see exactly how the dominoes were falling and how much it would cost to stand them back up. I kept my notes, meticulous dates, quotes, budget deviations. My file was no longer just insurance. It was becoming a blueprint for how to save the campaign. If and when I was called on. Late Friday afternoon, Grace stopped by my office, closing the door behind her. The CEO's been copied on the latest sponsor complaints, she said quietly. You might want to keep your phone close next week. I simply nodded, sliding my notebook toward me, and added one more entry to the growing record. The call came just after 9 on Monday morning. I recognized the Swiss country code before I even picked up. Marina. The CEO's voice was calm but clipped, the way it always was when something was on fire. I've been getting troubling updates. Sponsors unhappy, deadlines slipping, guests canceling. I've heard, I said carefully. There was a pause. The faint hum of an open line across continents. I want you to step back in quietly. Review the entire Aurora 3.0 plan. Work with the teams you trust, and get us back on track. Selena doesn't need to know this came from me. For now, consider yourself my eyes on the ground. It was a delicate order, and a dangerous one. Understood, I said. After we hung up, I sat for a moment with my notebook open, the edges of my notes curling from days of additions. This was no longer about watching, it was about steering. Even if from the shadows, I started by pulling the latest production calendars and cross-referencing them with sponsor agreements and venue contracts, documents I still had access to through shared drives no one had bothered to revoke. Within an hour, I'd identified 3 critical choke points that, if handled quickly, could stop the bleeding, the customs delay in Singapore, the Tokyo talent gap, and the overlapping venue bookings in London and Dubai. That afternoon, I called in a few quiet favors. Old contacts in logistics, a producer I'd mentored years ago, a travel coordinator who owed me more than one. Every conversation ended with the same instruction. This needs to look like it came from the current team. By the end of the week, the lighting shipment was cleared, a new Tokyo headliner confirmed, and the London-Dubai schedule conflict resolved. No fanfare, no credit, just results. From the outside, it might have looked like Aurora 3.0 had found its footing. Inside, I knew it was only the first step. The deeper issues overspending, fractured communication, inflated promises still waited like cracks beneath a fresh coat of paint, and I was already planning where to strike next. The summons came on a gray Wednesday morning, an emergency board meeting. All department heads required. When I stepped into the room, the air was taut, the kind of stillness that precedes a storm. Selena sat at the head of the table, her phone face down beside a stack of papers. Damien was to her right, posture relaxed, as if the room belonged to him. The CEO joined via video from Switzerland, his expression unreadable. "We need clarity on the reports I've been receiving," he said. "Marina, I understand you've been documenting the project's progress. Let's hear it." I slid a folder onto the table, its contents neatly tabbed. These are copies of sponsor emails that went unanswered, many redirected to Damien's private account. Here I pointed to a page is a contract revision he authorized, removing agreed deliverables in exchange for an inflated fee from the sponsor. The difference? It was billed to the project, not to the sponsor, inflating costs and eroding trust. Selena's brow furrowed. That's impossible. Damien told me the sponsors were the ones changing terms. I met her gaze. The sponsors have been trying to reach you directly. These copies came from them. All eyes shifted to Damien. He gave a short laugh, the kind meant to dismiss. This is a misunderstanding. I streamlined communications to avoid confusion. As for the fees, they were industry standard. The CEO's voice cut through. Industry standard doesn't mean bypassing protocol or altering contracts without approval. Selena's color drained. She looked between us at Damien, who wouldn't meet her eyes, and at me, who had just dismantled the narrative she'd been given. The silence that followed was the loudest sound in the room. Finally, the CEO spoke, effective immediately. Damien is suspended pending legal review. Marina, you will work with Selena to bring this project back in line. No exceptions. Damien's chair scraped back sharply as he stood, muttering something under his breath before leaving. Selena didn't move, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. I closed the folder and slid it toward her. This is everything you need to know about where we are and how to fix it. She took it, but her eyes stayed on me, as if seeing me for the first time in weeks. Damien didn't return after that meeting. By the next morning, an official company memo confirmed his removal and the initiation of a breach of contract case. Legal had moved fast, and the industry rumor mill even faster by lunchtime. His name was already circulating on do not hire lists. Selena and I were called into a private video conference with the CEO. He spoke plainly, without the usual preamble. The brand is bleeding, but it's not beyond saving. You two will finish this campaign together. Marina, you have full operational authority. Selena, you'll co-lead and handle external messaging. I expect results. Selena nodded stiffly. I did the same. When the call ended, the silence between us was brittle. She was the first to speak. I didn't see it. Damien. The way he was? Her voice trailed off. He was good at what he did. I said evenly, just not in the way you thought. We moved to the war room, a conference space lined with timelines, sponsor decks, and live feeds from each city team. I began reassigning tasks, prioritizing the most fragile points, securing replacements for withdrawn guests, renegotiating venue contracts, and shoring up technical redundancies. Selena handled calls to sponsors, her tone now measured instead of breathless. I could hear the difference: fewer promises, more assurances backed by actual timelines. There were tense moments. She pushed for a risky last-minute influencer stunt in Dubai. I vetoed it, citing brand risk. I proposed cutting one of the smaller live-stream cities to free up resources. She resisted until the budget spreadsheet made the decision obvious. Somewhere between those negotiations and the late nights poring over logistics, the air shifted. She began asking questions instead of making declarations. I found myself explaining my processes rather than defending them. By the end of the week, the campaign calendar was stable for the first time in months. The teams on the ground sounded calmer. Even the sponsors were back to discussing expansions instead of withdrawals. Selena stopped by my office Friday evening, a stack of updated schedules in her hand. "We might actually pull this off," she said. I looked at the numbers, then back at her. "We will." The first few days of working side by side were like navigating a narrow bridge, every step deliberate, every exchange measured. Selena still had flashes of impatience, and I still fought the instinct to keep my ideas guarded. But there was a new undercurrent, the shared awareness that if one of us slipped, the whole thing could collapse. I leaned into what I knew best: risk management. Every venue contract went through my desk. Every production schedule cross-checked for timing and feasibility. I cut redundancies, streamlined logistics, and built a cushion into every plan so a single delay wouldn't domino into disaster. Selena, for her part, brought an energy the sponsors hadn't seen in weeks. She reframed the narrative in the media, shifting headlines from Aurora 3.0 in trouble to Aurora 3.0, set to redefine global entertainment. She tapped her network of influencers and celebrities, filling gaps in the lineup with names that made the marketing team giddy. We began trading wins. She'd secure a last-minute feature in an international magazine. I'd renegotiate a supplier contract to save enough to cover an extra performance. She stopped bristling when I pointed out risks, and I found myself appreciating her ability to make even the most technical updates sound thrilling. The shift was most obvious during our joint calls with the city teams. Instead of competing for control, we split responsibilities. Without speaking, she'd handle the hype. I'd handle the hard questions. The mood on those calls changed. People sounded sharper, more confident. As the pre-launch media tour rolled out, numbers began to climb. Social media sentiment turned cautiously optimistic. Sponsors started asking about next year. For the first time in months, the team wasn't just surviving, they were building something worth being proud of. Late one evening, as we reviewed the final rehearsal schedule for the flagship event in Los Angeles, Selena closed her laptop and leaned back. "You know," she said, "this might be the first time I actually see the whole picture." I smiled faintly. "It's a good view." Outside the window, the city glowed, a mirror of the quiet momentum we'd built. The flagship night was close now, close enough to feel the hum in the air. The flagship night unfolded without a hitch. From the moment the opening lights swept across the crowd to the final encore, every transition, every cue, every broadcast feed fired perfectly. The energy backstage was electric years of experience meshed seamlessly with fresh ambition, and it showed. When the curtain dropped and the applause thundered on, I stepped into the green room to find the CEO waiting. He shook my hand, then turned to Selena. From his jacket pocket, he pulled a sealed envelope. 6 months, he said. Field training across our Asian branches. You'll learn operations from the ground-up kitchens, stage crews, contract negotiations. When you come back, you'll be ready for more than a title. Selena's smile was polite, but her eyes betrayed the surprise. She nodded, tucking the envelope into her bag without a word. Damien's name hadn't been spoken in weeks, but his absence lingered in the form of cleaner processes and steadier teams. Word in the industry was that the lawsuits had stripped him of most of his contracts. For someone who'd built his reputation on access, that was a permanent exile. In the weeks that followed, I formalized a new clause for all major projects, a mandatory operations mentor to bridge creative vision and execution. It wasn't glamorous, but it would keep another Aurora 3.0 from teetering on the edge. The morning Selena was set to leave, I met her at the airport. She had a suitcase in one hand and her passport in the other. When you come back, I told her, make people want to follow you, not fear you. She gave a small, genuine smile, then disappeared into the security line. A year later, I was at my desk when she walked in, a folder under her arm. 12 new ideas, she said, placing it in front of me. 7 of them came from the veterans you told me to listen to. I opened the folder, scanning the first page. The concepts were bold but grounded, ambitious yet realistic. Not every ending is about winning or losing. Sometimes it's about starting again when the person who was once your rival becomes the one who walks in with the next big idea.